In the first web video, we discussed the software required to create a website. That part was not so bad. Basically, there's free software available. In the second web video, we discussed the hardware required to create a website. Again, not so bad. You don't need an expensive computer to make a website. In the third web video, we discussed how to check your website with web.dev/lighthouse. This is where a little bit of trouble started to arise, as a lot of problems can be avoided by choosing the right web host. That led to the fourth web video, where we discussed 5 considerations in choosing a web host. So far, we're still in pretty good shape. You could spend a ton of money creating and hosting a website, but you don't have to do that. There are inexpensive options out there. So, are we ready to launch a website? Not quite yet, which is the topic for the 5th video, getting a good domain name for your website. This part can be tricky. First, what is a domain name? Well, here's an easy way to look at it. When you call someone on your phone, do you enter the number or do you use a name? It's easier to remember a name than a bunch of random numbers. Phone numbers can change. Names usually do not. So, what if you lost your phone or your list of contacts? Would you still be able to call all of your friends and family? Do you still remember all of their phone numbers? A phone without contacts is like a website without a domain name. You'd have to enter the IP address for the website manually, and depending on the website, that might not even work. That's why there's a huge demand for good .com domain names. They can make websites more memorable. While there are many other top-level domain names to choose from, big businesses use .com, like Apple.com, Google.com, and YouTube.com. If you look at the Alexa.com list of top websites in the United States, most of them end in .com. Even globally, most of the websites end in .com. Wow, that's a lot of commercial websites. Plenty of businesses are making money online. Way to go, capitalism. Why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem for new businesses that want to make a name for themselves. Imagine that you just watched web video number 4, read the comments, and then decided to go with HostRocket. There's a dream in your head that you simply must make real. Filled with determination, you click the Buy Now button. Immediately, you are confronted by an imposing challenge. The website states the product/service you have chosen requires a domain name. Please enter your domain name below. Let's stick with the pizza shop example from video number 4. Let's say you want to start a website for a pizza business, but now you need to choose a website name. Not realizing the difficulty, the pizza man enters in pizza.com as his choice. It's not available. That's not surprising. That domain name sold for $2.6 million. That leads to solution number 1 in getting a good .com domain name. Be rich. If you have a lot of money, you can probably get the name you want. If that sounds silly to you, know that Facebook is an excellent example of this. Back in February 2004, it started at thefacebook.com. Soon after, the domain name was shortened to what it is today. The iconic domain name was purchased for $200,000. But the name shortening didn't stop there. Facebook acquired FB.com from the American Farm Bureau Federation, who would later report $8.5 million in domain sales income. This is why it can be useful to follow the citation notes on Wikipedia, as the cited webpage no longer appears to exist. Instead, I was redirected to a new page where I could buy the domain name of the missing website. That leads to the second solution in picking a good .com domain name. Just pick something else. The name.com website is where I like to go and imagine the possibilities. Going back to the pizza shop example, let's say the shop owner decided to go with StatenIslandPizza.com as the domain name. It is available for the princely sum of $10,350. But look, there's hope, which leads to a third solution in getting the .com domain name you want. Don't use .com. StatenIsland.pizza is available, and it's only $12 for the first year. Subsequent years are a bit more expensive, though. That's an important thing to consider when buying a domain name. What's the renewal fee? That's another reason why .com domain names are so popular. In general, they're pretty cheap to renew. Putting keywords in the domain name can help with search engine optimization, but you might not want to go too crazy. Domain names need to be memorable too, so people can type them. A .com domain name is quite memorable, but there are other domain names that could be even better. As an example, back in May of 2017, I was watching the web.nyc auction. That's a nice domain name. However, the price was almost over $9,000. That was way more money than I wanted to spend. The point is that .com is memorable, but a different domain name might be even more memorable. As an example, pizzeria.nyc is available. At least it was available when this video was recorded. That is a nice domain name. Expensive, but nice. Other nice .pizza domain names are available too. The problem with going without a .com domain name is that people might add .com when it is not necessary. Remember, it's photics.com or photics.tv. It is not photics.tv.com. Domain names with fewer letters generally fetch a higher price. This is especially true if it's a word in the dictionary. This leads to the fourth solution in getting a good .com domain name. Make something up. Photics is a word in the dictionary, but it's not commonly used, so I didn't have trouble registering that domain name. That was back in 1998, though. Not only did I miss out on cheap Dogecoin, I missed out on cheap domain names too. Although Photics TV was registered recently, it wasn't hard to get because it's so obscure. What I mean is that a unique name could be exactly what you're looking for. A name might not mean much to many right now, but maybe you can give it meaning. That might be a better idea than sitting around waiting for a domain name to expire. The owner of the name could have automatic renewal set up. You might think that the expiration date is a month away, but nope, instant renewal. And then, once a domain name expires, it doesn't immediately become available. There's a grace period for the previous owner to get the name back. Even after the grace period, it still could be challenging, expensive, or even impossible to get a domain name before someone else does. So, once you get a domain name that you like, make sure to keep it active. As an example, I let pinbomb.com go. I was planning to make a World War II themed pinball game, but I didn't get around to it. To undo that problem, I'd have to spend $345 just to get the domain name back. And after this video, I suspect someone might try to register it. The problem is not just a good domain name. A good name in general is important. Since Pinbomb is not available on Apple's app stores, I'd rather just work on Picopede. It's bad enough having one unused domain name. Overall, these might not sound like great suggestions. It's basically be rich or pick something else. But remember that Facebook didn't start out with the domain name that they use today. Also, what's a Google? Today we know it as the #1 website in the world. I doubt it was the name that made them so popular. Rather, Google became popular because they were the best at search. So, instead of struggling to pick that perfect domain name, it's more important to focus on what you're good at. A good domain name is important, but having a good reason for people to visit your website is even better.